Hi, I'm Tom Jones and welcome to 1903 Productions.
The channel for the latest in motorcycle news, views and tech reviews.
So, it's been a little while since I put up a video and this one's probably going to take me a little while as well. So a bit of a project on while I've got a week off work, stuck in lockdown, so got to do some work in the garage on the girlfriend's Sportster. So this is a 1200 Low, pretty nice bike actually. We just put a little pillion seat on the back and some rear pegs so she can start taking a pillion on the back if she wants. But what we have found with this bike is it's very much a design for a girl, and by that I mean the bars in particular. So the bars are very narrow and turned in, so if you're broader across the shoulder, it's quite a tight fit. It's obviously designed for somebody, you know, not quite as wide across the shoulders. So what I thought I'd do is I've actually changed the bars on my Heritage here, and I've put 1.25 inch on something a bit fatter, not quite so much pull back, so a little bit more aggressive. So what I thought I'd do is take the Heritage bars that have come off my 2019 Heritage and put them on the Sportster. Now I've already done a quick test, just unbolted the riser with the speedo on, just pop the bars on just to give Vicky a sort of a feel what it's like, and she loves it. So that's the project for this. So the bars have cost me nothing. The bars on the Heritage only cost me about £120. So bars are going to not costing me anything at all. But what I do need to do this bike is, because the bars are going to be much taller, they're going to go from, I think this is about 7.25 inches rise on the bars to an 11-inch rise on the Heritage bars. So I'm going to have to replace the clutch cables, the throttle cables. On the Sportster here, the electronics run on the outside of the bars. With the Heritage bars, we've got the big cuts here that we can try and thread the electronics onto the inside of the bars, but that's all going to have to be extended. The top the top brake cable down to here, or it might be all the way. I don't know how that's going to work. I'm going to have to look at that. So I'm going to have to replace the brake line as well. So an awful lot more work that's going to be involved in changing the bars on this Sportster. So what I've bought to do the job, and this is sort of over 200 quid's worth, is this Burley Brand Cable Line Kit. Okay, so inside here we've got brake line, we've got clutch cables, throttle cables, we've got all the extensions to do all the electronics. So I think it's going to be a big job. It might take me a few days, maybe even a week, before I get this project finished and this video uploaded, but I'll try and stick with it. If you stick with me, we'll see how it goes. I'll see you soon. Hi and welcome back. So today we're in the confines of my garage for the remainder of the work. Forecast is rain for the rest of the week, so yeah, unfortunately there's not a lot of room to put a mount a camera as such, so I'm handheld for the rest of, I think, this venture into changing the bars on the Sportster. But at least that enables me to you know, show you sort of what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So let's show you what I've done so far. Okay, so you can already see here I've taken the seat off the bike. Relatively simple. I'm sure everybody can get their seat off. For this it was simply, you know, one nut on the back of the seat. I've also gone about taking the tank off. Now you don't have to take the whole tank off for this operation. What it recommends in the Burley installation instructions is to unbolt the front bolt. You'd probably have to just loosen the rear bolt for the tank here, just a bit, but you can unbolt the front and then just prop up the tank, and that will give you the access that you can probably get away with. So the first thing I'll show you is how to get this cover off, because we're going to need access to some of the wires. I'm going to follow the wires that come down from the electronics and round, and then they go into here. So we've got to take this off. So we're going to need a Torx socket in here. Oh, and since I was playing with wiring, etc., I have taken the side panel off, and here you can see I've removed the main fuse, so that simply goes inside this cover here. So you can just, you pull it out, main fuse will be here, pop the main fuse. Always worth doing that whenever you're doing any operations on the bike. Okay, so we're going to just take this Torx nut out. It is in fact a T25, not a T27. So I've just got a simple sort of like an Allen key, but it's a Torx set that I got cheap. And we can simply take that out. Okay, so that's the cover loose. So you can pull that back and you can see some connectors in here. Now the question is, which ones are we going to be disconnecting? So you can obviously we got the handlebar controls up here. This is the left hand side. We can follow the cable down around. This one here goes around. We can see it's that cable there, and that is that top connector there. So we're going to have to disconnect that top connector. So that was simple enough to get off. I just simply press down on the release mechanism here. You can see it just moving inside, and it just pulled straight off. I'm obviously not going to be able to get that through there, so this was the tank bolt. I'll just remove that and we should have enough access to get the wires out and start threading it back. Okay, so that was relatively straightforward, just to feed that through. And what I did decide to do was take off the front light, simply just undoing these two Allen head bolts here. They come out and this whole thing will hang down nicely. Next bit is to start seeing how we get these ties off here. There's two ties to make sure we've freed up all the electronics. Okay, so that actually wasn't too difficult. I just give it a bit of a wiggle, and you can see here how it's like a wedge shape. So I'm going to move a bit closer, you might be able to see this. So came out relatively easy. You can see how it's like a wedge shape, but it's split. So you can wiggle it, just pull it, get one side out, and then the other side will come out, no problem at all. So I'll just move on up to this second one here. Shouldn't be too much of a problem to pull that out, and then that'll be the left hand side freed up. Okay, so that's that one done. I've popped the clips back in just so I don't lose them. Maybe I'll sell the bars on. So that's the whole, harness for the left hand side done now. We'll move on to the right hand side. So it comes down here, around. Let's see if we can move this out the way. So it's this cable here, and it's actually going over to this socket just behind there. You can see it, the black one. So it should be the same as the last one. We'll just press down on the release and pop it out. Yeah, and with two hands that's relatively simple. You hit that release, it'll just pull out. Tuck it around this mount here. I just slid it up behind there, and we're out. And now I just need to again just pull out these little retaining clips on the bars. Okay, so we've also got the indicator wires that route down. So that one's this one here. Oops, there we go. That one there. The one from the other side, the right indicator is here. That's also routing through. So the two of them are going down inside here again, and this clips off a little bit further. You can see these teeth down the bottom, so you can just unhitch the teeth and give you a bit more access to the connectors. But you see on the other side, that black connector over there, that's where the two side indicators are plugging into. So okay, to help me with access, I decided to unplug this one as well to give me much more access now into there, which happened to be the other end of the front headlamp. So that's off and out the way now, so a lot more access for me to get my fingers in and get that connector out. Okay, so that's the connector out. I didn't have to worry about which way was which one was left and which one was right, because that's actually one connector. I did struggle a bit, so I just got a screwdriver to just push on the release tab there, and I just pushed on it and pulled it back, and it just slipped right out. Okay, so now we've got, you know, them going over to each side. So I'm going to have to take this connector apart, or at least one side off now, while I take the indicators off, or have them ready to come off, so that, you know, I can thread it through, because they're obviously following different routes. Should be relatively simple. There's little tabs in there. I think if I just push them in on either side, that will allow this bit here to release out, and then you can get a little screwdriver just in there, and it should just pop a little tab, and these, or at least I'll take one side out, one of the connectors out, that'll just enable me to take it off the bike. Okay, yeah, so relatively simple. It's actually easier just to prise these out to enable this to flip down, and that should give me access to the pins there. You can probably hear behind me the rain is coming down now on the garage roof, so hopefully I won't get dripped on. Always worth, when you're doing jobs like this, is to, and what I've just done, is take a picture, so you know which way round the wires go back in, before you suddenly you think to yourself, oh, I'll remember that. You don't, you never do. So take pictures, write it down, whatever's best for you. So now I'm going to just try and get my little screwdriver that I use to prise it open, just a little thing like this, into the here, and just pop out each of one side indicator connectors. Okay, so I've popped two of the connectors out. Bit fiddly. What I worked out you have to do is, from this side, you have to, if you see the pins at the top, so you put the little screwdriver in the bottom bit and just wiggle about, and then you'll hear it click, and you can just pull the connectors out. So a bit fiddly, but relatively straightforward. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, because we need to change the brake line for a longer one for the taller bars, is to take the the brake line out, is to first of all bleed all the fluid out of it. So I've got myself set up here, a little old coffee jar, little drill in the top with a bit of a plastic tubing. You can probably get that from a hardware store or whatever. You know, a bit of tubing for your fish tank or whatever. And then it looks like this is a metric part of the Harley, because the best fit I've got is a 10mm spanner on here. So I'm going to open this, let it start to bleed out into the jar before I then open up the reservoir, because I want to try and get a little bit of fluid out so I don't overflow and spill anything on the bike. So it'll just a couple of, you know, a crosshead there just to pop open the top, and that'll allow the rest of the fluid to come down before we start releasing all these banjo bolts. Okay, so I'll just pop this open and let it start to drain out. Okay, so as I suspected, there's no fluid coming out as yet, because I do need to open this cap up to enable atmospheric pressure in to let the fluid. So what I want to do is turn the bars to make sure that's level, and then I'll just take off the cap simply by opening up these two little screws. Okay, and as I suspected, as soon as I took the cap off, a lot of that fluid has already come out. Just looking up to the reservoir, you can see there, most of it is drained out. We've still got a bit of clean fluid there. Probably just need to move the bars around, get it over that hole, and then we can get some more of that fluid out. Down into the jar. I think we can just see it dripping down now. So I'm going to leave this and let it drain out. Okay, so while I'm still waiting for all that brake fluid to drain, I thought I'd release some of the clips holding the brake line. So I've released this clip, just popped it back in place so I don't lose it, and that was an Allen socket of 3/16. So 3/16 Allen key or an Allen socket, whatever you've got there to undo that, and just prise it open with a screwdriver and release it from around the brake line. And the other connector, clip, was this one here on the handlebar. That was a 1/4 inch socket. I used a 1/4 inch spanner just to release this, released it from the brake line, and again I've just popped it back on so I don't lose it. Looks like I might be waiting for some time for all this fluid, the remainder of the fluid, to come out. I suspect it's not going to come out. I'm probably going to have to start undoing this banjo bolt here. Now obviously brake fluid is very corrosive, especially that Harley uses .4 as opposed to probably most other motorcycles using .5.1. So I've got some .4 left over from when I was doing my my hydraulic clutch on the Street Glide, so I'll pop that in. I can always get it changed when I get it serviced from Harley Davidson after I've checked everything out. So this is the brake line. It's all one piece, even though it's got sort of a metal section to it. You can't separate it. It's all one piece going right round and then sort of back to a hose type going down to the caliper there. So let's start undoing this banjo. Okay, and looks like we're back to sort of a metric part of the Harley. The best sort of spanner I could find that fits this is a 12mm. So I'm just going to pop this off, but I'm going to put the camera down because I want to make sure I get a rag underneath to make sure we stop any dripping of brake fluid coming out. Probably going to get the last of the drips out the reservoir, so yeah, make sure you cover up the bike before you start this bit. Okay, so I decided to just get the last of the brake fluid out by just a couple of pieces of kitchen roll. So that was relatively simple, so shouldn't be anything coming out the reservoir. So I've got my rag set up there, so won't get any drips. So off we go. Well, that bit was simple. That's the whole brake line off now. Off and out the way. I'll remove that. Get out the way. And then we can pretty much start to remove all of this throttle side, the right hand side assembly off the bike. I'm going to have a look at what's the best way to get these throttle cables off that go down, so they come round along here and go down sort of to the throttle body. So I might have to take this air cover off to make sure I've got access there. Okay, so I've took the air filter off, but to get sort of more access I'm going to take this cover plate off as well. So again, just 3 bolts here, 5/32ths, and we should get this out the way. Okay, so there's another couple of bolts we've got to remove, which is these breather bolts here. So they are a 9/16, but you're going to need a long or a deep socket for this. So deep socket in. Okay, so I've got that plate off, relatively easy, but you will need a deep socket. And then we can see the 2 throttle cables coming in, and easy access. We can just pop the 2 throttle cables out there, and then that should free that up. Okay, so before I start popping out those throttle cables, because they're probably a little bit taut, I'm going to start taking apart the right hand sort of controls. So we got a T27 here to release what will be the brake and the master cylinder, and a T25 up here, and there'll be a T25 just here to release all this unit, and that should give me access to the throttle cables on the end here as well. Okay, so that's the right hand control nearly off now. I've popped one of the throttle cables out, so you just push it through here, and then you can see there's a groove there that you can just pick it up and just let the wire come through. So I'm about to do the other one, and then there should be no tension on the throttle cables now, so all this should come off. It's all loose. There's the brake unit, master cylinder down there, just out the way. Okay, so as I've just learned, the end of the throttle cables are actually balls, and they are contained within these little brass sort of end caps is what we push through. They popped out very easily, so be careful you don't lose that on the floor when you're taking the throttle off. All this throttle is now loose, and I'll go to the other end and take the throttle cables off the throttle body. Okay, so it looks like these come off relatively simple now because the throttle cable's loose. I can just feed this back here, and it'll just pop out. No brass ends to worry about falling all over the place on this end, and I'll just get my fingers behind there and pop the other one out. Okay, so now I'm going to try and release enough tension on the clutch cable to at least remove it at the bar end. We've still got to at some point release and remove the whole clutch cable, which will mean opening up this derby cover, inspection cover, and being able to release it from the mechanism inside. So we'll get to that, but I'm going to see if I can at least remove it from the bar first. So I've loosened up this locking washer. That was using a 9/16 spanner and holding the bottom section with the adjuster part with a 1/2 inch spanner. So I've just loosened that off, and hopefully there's enough adjustment now here for me to release this and release tension on the cable. So we'll see how we get on. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do to make life a bit easier for myself, because it's a bit difficult to get to that circlip underneath, is I'm going to loosen off here and here, Torx 27. I'm going to loosen off here and under here with the T25 to remove all this, and then I'll be able to work a bit easier to get that circlip off after I've got all this off. And that's the bars off. So all I had to do was undo these 4 Allen head bolts. I decided to unplug the speedo. You don't have to. I thought it would make it a bit easier. I probably didn't need to bother, but dead simple to plug it back in. Hi all, and welcome back. Well, glad to see you still with me with this installation of the bars and the Sportster. The Sportster's looking a bit bare. It seems to have been quite an operation, a bit more than I thought it'd be when I started. And you can see here we've got all the cables ready, and now, about to open this pizza box belonging to Burley Brand Cable Kit. and we'll get underway. But before I do, just like to give a shout out to Username Kate, who's teamed up with Bikesure, a motorcycle insurance broker specialist. So I'm sure Username Kate's got some great stuff on the way soon, so well worth checking her out on YouTube if you haven't already subscribed to her. Okay, so let's got all these cables here. Let's open this Burley box and get underway with the cable extensions. Okay, so I thought I'd start with something simple. So I've got the connectors out of the upfront turn signal extension kit from Burley Brand. And this simply consists of some extension cables, small heat shrinks, and a couple of large heat shrinks to go right over the top when we've finished. So start with the simplest one. This is the brake master cylinder side, so the right hand side of the bike as you're sitting on it. Put that down there. And off the end we simply have a sort of a dark blue and a purpley violet cable. Let me just see if we can get some more light. Okay, so how does this work? So we've got a couple of blue wires, we've got a couple of black wires, and a couple of brown wires. I suspect what this is for the American kit, where generally the Americans have their indicators on all the time as kind of like side lamps, whereas in UK and probably the rest of Europe they're just an indicator only. So I suspect, you know, in the UK we've got the 2-pin and a 2 contacts on the indicators, where in the US they've probably got the 3 contacts and therefore need the 3 wires. Okay, so I'm going to say we've got a black here and sort of a browny colour. So the blue cables I'm going to put to one side, and we'll use one of the black and one of the sort of brown colours. We've got one that's more brown and one that's more purple. So if I look across to the clutch side, yeah, we've got a black and a more purple colour for the the left hand clutch side. So I'll pop that out the way, the purple out the way for now, and one of the black, so that'll be for the other side. Now these, we can see at one end you've got the same connector, which will go back into the connector which is still attached to the other side. So that will go back into the other contacts on here. So the other end should just pop into this side, so they don't clip in at all. Looks just, it's just you get the 2, you push them in, and I suspect it's the heat shrink that's going to ensure that they're held securely together. Now I haven't got a heat gun. I'm going to use the next best thing, hairdryer. So I was a bit concerned that might not hold it greatly in place, but that's pretty good. So let's do the black wire. Pop that in. Pass along the heat shrink. And then we get the hairdryer on it again. Okay, so that feels pretty sturdy. Okay, this time to speed up the process a little bit. I've popped both wires in, put both heat shrinks over. I thought I might as well heat them up at the same time because the hairdryer keeps cutting out when it gets too hot. I've seen people do this with a lighter and just wave the lighter underneath. Does a really good job, but I'm going to stick to the hairdryer for now. Okay, and then we get the other larger piece of shrink wrap. See if we can get it over this time. Oh, it's going to be another tight one. Okay, so there we go. So just get the hairdryer on that, heat it up. That's the other one done. Okay, and there's the second one. All done, nice and secure. Should look good when it's back on the bike. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. Always have a brew. Okay, so I started with the easy one because this next one, this looks a little bit more scarier. So first of all, we've got to try and take this black bit off from the grey bit. Looks like it's just a couple of tabs on either side and that should come off, so we'll try that. There we go. Aha, so that's this black area here. Okay, so to get the pins out of this connector, we've released this back in a bit. It's probably like a water seal, but to actually release it, you need to, if you can see inside, you need to put your pliers in the center of this sort of white retaining tag inside, and I'll pop up the instructions straight out the service manual for the Sportster. You pull it up and you can hear it sort of click into a secondary position. Then you get something like a paper clip, or I've got a little bit of metal here off an old key ring, and there's little holes inside just above each of the pins where you simply push into the hole and you'll hear it, and then you can pull the connector out. So here you can see I've got the white connectors out here. You repeat that for all of the cables, but make sure you take a photo of where all the connectors are before you start. So I'll do that now. Both sides, but I'll also throw up the circuit diagram to help you out as well. And I'll open up the extension kit and make sure we've got all the cables and all the right colours. Okay, so here we have the from inside the packaging, the handlebar switch extension, Burley brand. There's all the connectors and heat shrink that we need to do these connectors. So let's check we've got all the right wires. Oh, and included in the kit is the paper clip that I wish I'd known and didn't have to break apart an old keyring of my own. There we go. Okay, so I'm just using the paper clip now. You just push down. There we go. That's the next one out. And you just continue until you get all the connectors out. Okay, so I've finally got all the connectors out. A couple of them are a bit of hard work, but with the help of a little pair of pliers as well as the paper clip, I managed to get them all out. You'll see that this sort of black end is still on here, so obviously that's not going to slide across when we put the extensions on, so we're going to need to take this off. So I'll just get them all lined up roughly, and that should, okay, there we are. Now you'll also probably notice I've also written down the colours, so it'll back up as well to using the iPhone to pop a few pictures. So let's get these extensions on. Okay,
looks like these are the connectors that are going to go into the pin. So this will be the connector that goes on the other end, and we'll just pop all these together and heat shrink them up. Okay, so that's all the connectors on, heat shrinked. Now just to put the larger piece of heat shrink over the top. I think this might be a bit awkward. I think you could have been a bit more generous with the size of your heat shrink on this one, Burley. Okay, so I failed to get the heat shrink over all the heat shrinked connectors. So what I've decided to do, it's all right. I put the heat shrink on as far as I could. Even tried to use some soap, but I couldn't get it over the end. So I've just finished off the last bit of exposed cabling with some black gaffer tape. So okay, so the last electrics to do, the last electrical connector is the right hand side. Okay, so to get these off, you just need to put your little screwdriver underneath each side. We'll do this side, and there we go. That's that one off. There we go, that's that out. And then same as the last one, you need to get your pliers down into the center of that, pull it out, you can hear it click, and then we go about from this end pushing the paper clip down, and then there you hear the click, and then that should be this white and black one here, and you just repeat that for each of the connectors to pop them out. I've written down again which connectors were, probably worth taking a photo, and I'll pop up the circuit schematics as well. And there we have all the wires out of the connector. Pop the connector to one side, slide these off. There we are. So I'll pop that. You can see there's a slot there, so you won't get it wrong putting it back in later on. Of course, we can't put any of the connectors back on the cables yet because we're going to internally wire these in through the bars. If you were putting them back on the outside of your bars, like they came off the Sportster, you can pop all your connectors back on now, which I'd recommend. So you do them one at a time. So let's get on with extending all the wires. Okay, so that's the 6 wires for the right hand throttle side electrics all extended. So back to trying to get the last of the heat shrink over it. There's 6 wires here rather than 8, so hopefully we got a better chance of getting over this. Let's see. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a difficult one again. So I'll just shrink up this end, and I'll just put a bit of tape again over this exposed wires here. And there we are. So a bit of tape unfortunately here, shrink wrap down, and enough of the cables coming through to put the connector on later. So there. Now for doing the throttle cables. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is release these throttle cables. Now they're just held inside with a tiny little circlip. You can probably see that there. I'll show you on the new cables, probably a bit more obvious. Now they just pop inside around the end of the throttle cable, so I've managed to get one out. So this is the cable. It's not threaded in or bolted in or anything. It's this tiny little circlip. Now you need to pop that out. Now that was pretty awkward, but I managed to do it with a tiny little screwdriver to just get under the edge of one and then pry it up and then force it over the top, and then it just popped out. I'll show you how it looks on the new throttle cable. Now both throttle cables, although they're the same length, are not identically the same. If you look on the other end, the cable just comes out here, but on the other one, on the other end, there's a little spring. There's a little spring there. So if we're going to replace it, make sure you replace it with the correct one. Okay, so this is the one without the spring on, and if I show you this side, you could probably just about see there that it's got the circlip on ready. So that at the moment won't go through because of the circlip. You need to just pop that little circlip off, poke it through, and then pop the little circlip on. Okay, so I've just popped the little circlip off. We just push it through, and then I'll just pop the little circlip back on the other side. Okay, so I've managed to get that one side on now, so that's in. Best thing I found was a pair of long nose pliers and just force it over the top, and then as soon as it locates itself, that's solid. So let's get the other one off. And that's the second circlip out. That came up quite easy. Now I kind of know how to just prise it up and then prise it over the top. And there we are, that's the other throttle cable out. Let's pop this other one in. Take the circlip off first. There we go. That's the circlip off there. Get rid of those two. Pop that in there. And it's in. There we go. Okay, so now let's start trying to thread all the electric cables wiring through the bars. Okay, so I just started just by laying out each of the components as they should be on the right side of the bars. Now let's start trying to thread them through. There we go, that's one cable through, nice and easy. There we are. Yeah, that's the second lot through. Put some one of the indicators in next. There we are. How easy was that? Okay, so as you can see, I've pretty much got all the cables through now. Got a few extra ones where I'm reinstalling the Heat Demon grips. Well, they're not grips really. The Heat Demon heaters that go in the end of the bars. So reinstalling them. But as I was putting the clutch back on, I realised, well, what we've got to do is the same as what we did before when we took it off. Is pop this pin out and get the new clutch cable in. That basically goes in there. Pop the pin back in. There we go. Now I'm going to just put these on roughly, the all the controls and the clutch and electronics, all just screw them on temporary before I take it out into the garage and install it on the bike. Okay, so the final thing I thought I'd do before I take everything out to the garage is pop the connectors back on the end now that I've put them through the bar. So I've got the grey, got the black, got the inserts there, black through there, white and yellow. White and yellow. Okay, so that's the black connector done from the right hand side. I'm going to move on now, do the grey one from the left hand side controls. Same as before, follow your diagram, put this bit on first, put the cables in, and then push the retaining tab back in. Okay, so we're back in the garage and I've just quickly brought the bars in and put the top clamp, which is part of the Speedo, and just put the bars loosely, roughly on the bike just to start with before I start connecting everything back up. After we've done all that, obviously I've got the throttle to do, and then the big one will be, because I never took the old clutch cable out of the clutch assembly on, you know, and removed the derby cover, etc. So that'll be my final job. But let's just have a look how it's looking so far. I'm getting quite pleased with it now. So here's how the bars are looking so far. Let me see if I can move further back. And I think already it's looking much cleaner without all the cables on display around the bars. Much more chopper like. Yeah, I think this is gonna look good. Obviously I've got to sort everything out. Okay, so we're back in the garage. Just spent a fair while cursing and swearing getting the throttle cables in, but I'll show you what I've done, and I'm sure you'll find it much easier if I show you how I've managed to work it out. Okay, so to attach the throttle cables, and you might remember these two little brass bits that fell into my hand when I was taking it off. Well, you get two new ones of these with the new throttle cables. So I've got a bit of a kink there because I didn't put it in right at first, so that'll straighten itself out over time. So if I show you here, you can see how you put the ball into the end of the brass retainer, and then you can see where this routes over the top and then a lock down inside there. So same on the other side there, and then that gives you your throttle movement. Down on the throttle body we have, now this one is the one with the spring on, so you can see, if you follow my routing, it comes down between the middle of the forks, threaded inside the sort of recess here that's already in this plastic section, down, and one with the spring on the front, one without the spring at the back. Both of them, when they're all adjusted properly, will fit nicely in there. So one around the back, one around the front, and if I just move the throttle, you can see it opens up the throttle body and closes and snaps shut. So once that's adjusted, that'll be fine. So I'm just gonna put everything back together. So this bit here that's part of the brake has to go in a notch area. You can just see it there, a notched area on this housing. So you've got to get everything lined up to be able to get all the screws in and tighten itself down properly. So that's what I'm going to get on with now, tighten that up so at least it's roughly in position, and then I can start just adjusting the throttles to make sure that's all working properly. Okay, so that's all that screwed together roughly in the right place. Now to get at the adjusters, you can see I've removed one here. Get my hand in, bit difficult, one hand, there you go. Just pull it out the way and we can get at the adjusters. So we just loosen off this locking nut and then we can start to adjust and get the cables adjusted correctly. Okay, so I've made adjustment to the adjusters there. You can just see I've opened them out a bit, and looking down at the throttle, you can now see the cables moving reasonably well. You can see the throttle opening. Okay, just one last point I forgot is make sure we tighten up these jam nuts or locking nuts. So I'll just thread them up to the adjuster, and little 1/4 inch, just to nip it up. There we go, all done. Just loosely put the brake line in place, so flowing down. They gave a new sort of clip which I've decided to put here to control the brake line here, so we don't get any rubbing against the bars, so it kind of holds this pot section in position. We've got a nice bend going down. I don't know whether to pack out this bit here to stop the cable moving, maybe here. I'll think about doing that maybe later. And then it runs down and into the caliper there. So just roughly in place, getting everything lined up. Okay, so I've just popped the left hand side grip on. The grip just slides on, sits just inside this this casing here for the controls. Tightened it up. What I did notice is, because there's not so much pullback on these bars, that the indicators were sort of wonky, because they've come out more, so that they were pointed in this way. So quite simple to adjust. There's an Allen key just down inside there. Just loosen that up, position it as you like, tighten it up. Done the same on the other side. So that's the bars almost sort of in position. Now to just get on with all the electrics and plugging it all back together. Okay, so I've just plugged all the connectors back in. As you can see, there's actually loads of cable here. I suspect, you know, this 12-inch kit is designed around, well, it's probably got the throttle and the brake cables all right, but the electronics are probably a bit long. I suspect that's because with this being an 883 low and had sort of like a 7.5-inch rise, it only needs another couple of inches, but there's probably a good 8 inches added to here. So it's probably perfectly capable of taking, you know, an iron, which has got quite low bars sort of right down here, you know, which might need that quite extra length. So plenty of, I'm gonna have to sort of turn it back on itself when I put it back. So anyway, that's all plugged back together. I've popped the light back on, so I've got to plug that in a second. Just pop that through there, and that goes into that black connector there, so you can see the difference in length here, that I've got plenty on the other stuff. So I'll do that one last. Just popping the light back on itself, just 2 simple screws either side. Just going to tighten them up now. Okay, so that's the electrics tucked away. Not probably as neat as the original, because it should have come straight out. If your original bars were much lower, that would probably come straight out of there in a nice black sheathing up. But I've had to tuck it around inside because it's a bit too long, and just that one T25 Torx to hold it all back together. Okay, so the first thing to do is reattach the large breather bolts. It's a 9/16, but you're going to need a deep socket to fit that back on, and then it's 3 simple bolts. Okay, so the next thing we need to fit is refit those breather pipes. So they simply just push in. That's the breather pipes on there, and then we're going to pop those 3 bolts in with a 5/52 Allen head. Then we have 4 bolts holding on the air filter. That's a 3/8.
Then this rubber piece just sits on there. It's got just sits on like that. There's a couple of spacers on here. I think it's that way around. A couple of spacers pop in there, and then your cover just pops back on with a 13/16 Allen head bolt, and that's all the air filter back on. Okay, so we're back in the garage, and today I'm going to fill and bleed the brake lines, but first thing we've got to do is tighten them up, because I only put them on temporary. So we're going to tighten these banjo bolts up to, it says about 17 to 22 pounds-feet, so about, you know, getting on for 30 Newton meters. So I'm just going to get the torque wrench out, tighten them up on both up here and down at the caliper, and then take the reservoir cap back off again. I'm going to do the reverse bleed method, so I've got a couple of syringes. I'm going to try and pump it in from the caliper upwards, but you know, you can do it sort of the traditional, fill this up and then, you know, pumping away until you get no bubbles coming out the bottom, whichever method you prefer. And you can see now I've set up the front banjo on the front caliper, and I'm just about to torque that up to the proper setting. Okay, so you can see I've drawn some .4 brake fluid into syringe. You make sure you lift this up so we get the air bubble to the top, and then we just keep squeezing fresh brake fluid up into the reservoir, making sure that we don't overflow it. And we try and get, you know, minimize the amount of bubbles, if at all, we get into the system. Okay, so we're filling up the reservoir. You can see it coming up there. The reverse bleed method is great. You could see the little bubbles coming up at first, and just a small sort of syringe is enough that every time I pump up one syringe worth, it bleeds the system completely, so there's no more bubbles coming up. But I've got to continue this until we get up to that ridge there, and we should see on the sight glass that, you know, the levels that is correct, and then we can put the cap back on. Okay, so there was obviously a bit of air still in the system somewhere, maybe in the caliper or in the master cylinder itself, but there was no pressure in the brake lever. It would just pull straight in. So I set up my little bleed kit, got a little spanner on the bleed nipple, and as soon as I opened it, air was coming out. Press the lever, tighten it, put pressure back on the lever, open it up, and the bubbles came out quite quickly. And now we've got, you know, a decent pressure on the brake lever. So that's the brakes done. Okay, so we're starting to take the old clutch cable off. On here on the Derby cover we've got some T27 Torx head bolts. So now, if your Harley's regularly serviced, these should come off relatively easy, but even though this one is by a Harley dealership, I'm struggling to get these two off. So going to take me a bit of time to try and get these off. I've squirted some WD on. Let's hope I can get these off. Okay, so by rotating the mechanism, we then leave enough room for us to get that cable out just there, and to take off the cable is just simply unbolting it with a 9/16 ratchet. Okay, so that's the lower end of the clutch cable in, and we can see the cables through there ready for me to attach it back up. Okay, so there's the bits back on. Once you can get the nut back inside here, turning this counterclockwise, so I'll just show you. So that would have been it, you know, as I'm tightening it back on counterclockwise until you can't go anymore, and then what you're meant to do is back it out. Sorry, you probably can't see that. So you counterclockwise till you can't go any further, then you feel the resistance, and then you back it out a quarter of a turn. So there we go, quarter of a turn. And that we now can pop that back on, put the derby cover and nuts back on. I've ordered some nice chrome ones, especially since I've got one that is in need of replacement, and that's the lower half done. Okay, the final step to adjust the clutch. So with the 9/16, loosen off the locking nuts. You'll probably need to hold the adjuster with a 1/2 inch spanner, and we want to adjust it to take out the free play here till there's only about, can you just see, so till there's only about 2 to 3 millimeters of free play. Now obviously we've got quite a bit there. We've got probably about 6 mil, so I need to get that down to about just a couple of millimeters. Okay, so I've tightened up all the free play out, brought down the locking washer, so all's to do now is just to push the grommet back over, pop the clip back on that just holds it to the bar, and we can see up here that all the slack's out. I've just got a couple of millimeters of movement there in the clutch, so when we start it up we'll see how that is. I'll just finish up here. Well, and there we are, all finished. So I'll just give it a once over tomorrow. I'm going to give it a bit of a clean, bit of a wash down, make sure there's not any splashes of brake fluid sitting anywhere that might corrode anything. Make sure that, you know, any oil all washed off. But that's it. So the clutch cable maybe looks a bit long. And the throttle cables, they're probably, well, it says for 12 inch, these are actually 11 inches, these bars, so it's probably an extra inch of cable there. All finished off into the primary. Everything nicely neat put away. Much better sitting position now on the bike. So there we are, all finished.